What happened next in America led Hayek to conclude there can be something worse than government ignorance: hubris. He thought that entire period showed the calamity that can come when governments try to use the power of money to shape the economy. In America in the 1920s, the greatest boom the world had ever seen was taking off. Consumers couldn't get enough of new products like cars, telephones and record players. The stock market rose higher and higher. As the Roaring Twenties wore on, the finest economic minds in America came to believe the boom would never end. Back in Austria in early 1929, Hayek was convinced they'd got it all wrong. He'd become the director of the recently founded Institute for Business Cycle Research. Its job was to understand why economies were always lurching from one boom and bust cycle to another. Hayek called it the 19th century pattern, though it was hardly a thing of the past. The institute was based here at the Chamber of Commerce, where Hayek had been developing a new theory of boom and bust, along with new thinking about the market. To many, the downs were unpredictable, a kind of force of nature that might destroy an economy without warning. Hayek had been working on a new idea, that the seeds of busts were sown during booms. Because the world had become increasingly interconnected, Hayek had been studying the American boom to help him forecast what would happen to the Austrian economy. He had to produce monthly reports on the state of the European economy, and in 1929 he's credited with making a striking prediction. He thought the American stock market boom was about to end. He was right. In October 1929, Wall Street fell off a cliff, and the 20s roared to an anguished end. Hayek's prediction came out of what he saw happening at America's new central bank. The Federal Reserve had been set up in 1913 to stabilise America's notoriously shaky private banks by offering them a reliable source of credit. Hayek's big idea was that it was the cost of borrowing, the interest rate set by central banks like the New York Federal Reserve, that caused unsustainable booms to develop and caused the inevitable busts. In the 1920s, the governor of the New York Federal Reserve had a revolutionary idea. Benjamin Strong thought he could use the bank's power to set interest rates to influence what was happening in the economy. In many ways, that idea of using interest rates marked the start of modern monetary policy. Strong began buying government debt on the open market, which did have the effect of raising the amount of money in the economy. But unlike Austria's hapless central bankers, Strong had a strategy. The difference with what had happened in Austria was that the Fed wasn't buying treasury bonds to help the government pay its bills. It was doing it to get money into the market and keep interest rates low. The central bank wanted to encourage everyone, individuals and households and companies, to borrow from the banks. It worked.
Steel up, utilities up, motors up, radio way up, everything up, up, up.
Strong's intervention really paved the way for the financial system we have today. Thanks to all that credit he created, the stock market rose higher and higher. With loans so cheap, many borrowed money to buy shares. Others invested heavily in property. The Federal Reserve hoped its intervention would keep the boom going indefinitely. But Hayek believed Strong's policy was sowing the seeds of an eventual bust. According to Hayek, the low cost of borrowing was sending the wrong signal to investors. In effect, that low interest rate was telling them that America was saving more, that there was lots of cash sitting in bank accounts ready to be lent on and invested. It wasn't true.
Don't sell America short. Why, man, we've scarcely started.
By the time the Federal Reserve spotted the warning signs, it was too late.
Technical readjustment. Over $14 billion go with them, and so goes the confidence of a nation. Wall Street.
The crash came when interest rates rose, and investors started to realise the banks didn't have money to back up all those investments after all.
The jazz age is over. All over.
To Hayek, the lesson was clear. By feeding the boom with cheap credit, the Federal Reserve had helped cause the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression.